With Valentine's Day just around the corner, we thought it would be an appropriate time to show you a Valentine's Day card being designed in real time and then visualize it with the Visualis3R software. So we're all about showing what you do. So if you are actually doing something, you should be showing the effects. In our case, we're visualization software, so we need to show you a bit. But how do we get there? Really simple. We're actually going to do a quick brief of a Valentine's Day card. So this is a typical thing that you might be doing. So we're going to print this digitally, and we're going to print it onto a rainbow holographic material. Then we're going to put a white ink down over the top of the rainbow holographic material to block part of that out. Then we're going to print CMYK and then neon pink. So this means we're going to be using a 6-color press. So the one we're going to use in this example would be the Fujifilm Revoria PC1120. So that can put the white at the front, the pink at the end, and the CMYK sandwiched in the middle. We're also then going to demonstrate some embellishment. So, for example, we might be doing something like an MGI-based type workflow whereby we put a red foil down as a flat foil and then have a sculptured 3D raised gold foil on there. An alternative option could be to put gold foil down flat and then put a Duplo over the top of it to raise it up that way and get a glossy raised domed effect over the foil. Two different ways of working. So let's jump into that. So first of all, CMYK. Okay, so you might be thinking orange, not very Valentine's, or Valentine hearts are typically red. But what we're going to do is we're going to use a neon pink in combination with the CMYK. Now, if you're not familiar with mixing CMYK with pink inks, do take a look at the Touch 7 website. That's www.touch and then the number 7.co. That'll explain all about printing with neon inks with CMYK. And we're going to demonstrate that in this instance here. So we're going to switch on our pink. Okay, well, at the moment we're working with the overprint preview switched off, so we can't see any of the layers below that pink. Now let's just switch on overprint preview so we can see that. So you go to overprint preview. You can also switch it on from your separation preview. So now we see a really nice looking red. Okay, so the pink in combination with that orange is creating a red. Okay, but what you see on the screen doesn't really show you what you're going to get. And this is what I'm going to demonstrate here, is how different types of printing processes and different types of pigments and inks and substrates all affect your print. And as a designer, you need to know this, because otherwise, how do you know what it's going to come out like if you can't see it? So we're going to demonstrate that today on this one as well. So let's just switch off the overprint preview for now so it's a little bit easier to see what we're adding. Next, we're going to add on some little red foil hearts. So these ones here are red foil. Then we're going to add on a gold 3D foil, so happy Valentine's Day. And then we're going to add a design, an alternative design using Duplo. So we're going to put Duplo over the top of the gold and also in these hearts here. So anything that's black is the Duplo. And then we're also going to be using that opaque white to block out various things. In fact, let's think about it. We might actually, there we go, I had it hidden. So there's the other part of my opaque white. So independently, if we take a look at all these with it switched on, it looks an absolute mess. Because when you're designing with embellishments and when you're designing with fifth color, when you start layering things up, you have to make them overprint or multiply on top of each other so they all go weird colors. Also, you cannot see a varnish on your screen. Varnish is clear, it's reflective, it doesn't have a color to it. Same thing with things like lamination. So the whole point of the Visualis3R software is to show you what we're going to get. So from here, we're now going to save that as a PDF file. And we do recommend when you're saving a PDF file to save as PDF X4. So PDF X4 is industry standard for pre-press. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into the Visualis3R software and visualize that file. Okay, so first of all, we select the PDF file. Find your PDF that you saved, and then that will then begin the ripping process. So there is a rip in the background, it's taking your PDF file, and it's then processing that into file format that can be read by the Visualis3R software. Now this does take a short moment to do this, maybe a minute or so. We do prefer quality, so the resolution of our rendering is higher than what you might find in other rendering engines. We prefer to do that because you get a better quality. The last thing you want is pixelation on your file, fine lines breaking up, text with sawtooth jagged edges. So there is a slight delay, and in this instance there's multiple spot colors that it's building up as well. So just be patient whilst it loads up. Okay, and there we go. So we have the first look at our file. Now, if we go to color separations, we can see how this is all going to be done. So first of all, we need to make up our substrate. So we're going to go to substrate controls, and we're going to do a rainbow holographic. Now, you can watch our video tutorials on how all this works. I'm just going to change my coverage variation. So in short, coverage variation is basically how much of the sheet that you're seeing on the screen at that time is the silver effect and how much of it is the rainbow holographic. Because when you're looking at rainbow holographic material, it's normally typically silvery looking, and it's only when you pick up and move the print that that actually changes and you see the rainbow holographics. But we're trying to simulate this on a flat sheet in reality, so we can control it in this way. Now we're going to put a white ink down. So the white ink that we created, that's our spot white. Now we had to color it up a cyan color in the artwork file because you can't see opaque white on your computer screen. One of the main reasons why you don't see anything correctly. So this is the white. Now we can also change the opacity. So maybe on the Fujifilm Revoria, the white's not fully opaque, but they would normally recommend a couple of hits of white to boost up that white ink. So you can control this depending upon how much opacity your white ink has, and then you can save these as defaults. And again, watch the tutorial videos on how all those things work. For the purpose of this, let's just assume it is, let's go with 90. Okay, so we set the white up. Then you have your cyan, your magenta, and your yellow. So we've got that orange colour back again, and the black. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add that neon pink. Now at the moment, that neon pink looks nice because it's actually set to a default colour for the Touch 7 system. But the Fujifilm Revoria's pink doesn't look the same. So just to demonstrate this, let me just switch all of this off. I just want to show you the pink on its own. So that is the typical pink that's built into the Touch 7 system, but that's not the same color as Fujifilm Revoria. Fujifilm Revoria's pink looks like that. It's a much cleaner, kind of like Barbie bubblegum pink. And what that means is when you start layering up color behind the back of it, you don't actually get a red. Now you would never know that if you're actually designing and what you see on the screen shows you red, but in reality when you print it, it looks more like an orangish red. So very, very important of how different company pinks react with combinations of CMYK. I'll give you another example. If I move this over to SwissKey Print, we're going to go more to a bright red. Their pink is much more saturated. It's more towards the magenta spectrum than it is towards the bubblegum pink. But let's keep this with the Fujifilm Revoria in mind. So that is their pink. That's what we're going to work to. So you can't make the Fujifilm Revoria pink plus magenta and yellow actually look like a bright red. That's one of the limitations of this. But we're going to just work with what we've got. Okay, so we're also going to put the gold foil on there. So at the moment, that gold foil is flat, but we're actually going to do this as a 3D raised foil. So go to the 3D raised foil section and you can then add some depth to it. Really simple. You can also change the bevel width and the shadow and the highlights. And just to demonstrate this, we can make it more rounded. We can add more shadow to it. We can play around with all of that stuff, make it more highlight edge, whatever you want to do to set up how the foiling looks coming off your machines. And the whole point of this software is you set your settings up the way that your machine works, the way that your foiler works, the way that your varnishing system works. So I'm going to say that's what mine looks like typically when I foil mine. Maybe just like a little bit off that highlight edge just to bring it down a bit more natural. Okay, so let's just say I'm happy with that. Okay, now the next thing is we have the red foil. So in this case we have the red foil, which is just flat. If you wanted to, you could add textures to it. So there are some hot foil stamping systems out there that have different textures like stardust and hammered and brushed metals, etc. We're just going to leave it as flat for now. We can also change the colour of the foil. So if we don't think that red's quite the right shade, maybe it needs to be a bit darker, then we can go into the colour picker and we can make it darker, we can make it lighter, etc. So red foil. So that's one option of it, and we now have something that we can move around. We've got the rainbow holographic effect. Now if you notice, I've got quite a lot of that sheet looking rainbow and psychedelic at the moment. That's what I was saying about the coverage variation. If I now bring this down back to about 100, we've got more of the grey coming through, less of the rainbow. So it's about realism. It's about setting your expectations. Now when you're working with a big sheet like this, having the coverage variation set to 1.0 or maximum basically acts like a cloud filter. Imagine looking through clouds. So the silvery effect is kind of like a cloud type effect. which works well here because you don't want the entire sheet looking like that, because it would just be like, wow, that's wacky and weird. So we're trying to build realism into it. Now, when you work with a small design, let's say you've got a business card and you've got a small area, maybe it's just in this Valentine's thing, then you need to make sure that you can actually see some of that rainbow holographic. So then you can play with your coverage variation to show more through in your visualization. Okay, so next we're going to show another alternative to this. We're going to take that gold foil, we're going to actually bring the height back down to 0 to make it flat again. And this time we're going to hit a Duplo separation over the top. Now, again, these are default settings pre-baked into the software as factory settings. The idea is that you tailor this the way you work. So I've left mine unaffected. So what you would do is when you get your software and you've got a sample of Duplo, you might decide that the bevel needs to be around about here. You might decide that we need less gloss, less reflection, and we can build up the way that Duplo works. And when you've got it right, then you can save it as a default. So if you press save as default, it means that every time you load the software, it's coming in with your settings. Or you can save it as a preset, because with Duplo, you've got different height. You can control the height, the micron height, the depth of the varnish, and the tone of it as well. So if you use 50% of the Duplo, so you take a Duplo separation, use 50% grey on the separation, it means you get, for ease of explanation, you would have 50% of the height. Now, that isn't exactly true because it all depends on the total micron depth of that Duplo separation. So you can specify how deep do I want the deepest part of that varnish to be, and then the tints that you use below it have to be controlled in your artwork file. So do check out the partners at Duplo. You can go to the Visualis3R website, go to our partners page, click on the logo, and it'll take you to their website for finding out more information about how their machines work. So in this case, we're just going to say that is my design. We've got the varnish, we've got the 3D kind of effect going on there, and it's just a great way to be able to simulate these effects. And like I said, if you look in here and you say, okay, that painting really doesn't work very well, you could go back to your artwork, put some more magenta into it, reload the PDF file, set your file up again. And that's where your presets come in, because you don't want to have to go in here and setting all this up over and over again every time you use the software. So I do stress, check out the video tutorials. It's really simple. All you have to do is, let's just say, for example, we're going to switch off the Duplo. Let's say we're going to do the 3D raised foil again. Let's just say that's what it is. If I do save as default, then let me just go and play around. Let's turn that off. Next time I bring the software in, what it's going to do is it's going to bring it in like that. Straight away, your settings, it will just load it in, and you don't have to fuss around with everything. Now, as a printer or a design, you can share as well. So maybe I want to go gold foil 3D MGI, maybe that's what I'm getting on here. I can save it as a preset. I can then export that out and give it to a client. I could give it to somebody else that's using the software. I could share it between different stations in my pre-press department. So, quick rundown there for you of how to design a Valentine's Day card, explanation about how different things work. For example, about the pink, and obviously the necessity of using a white ink to block out part of the metallic substrate. So, hope this was beneficial to people. Hope you all have a fantastic Valentine's Day, and if you have any questions, please do reach out to us at hello@v3r.studio.